So that's fine. Just leave it. Hi. I'm Matt Welch.
Vain girl
I'm not
was editing her photo.
Did not think I looked very good, and your face is hidden by the mic. So
Good.
I wanted to change it, but YouTube, I don't know how to do it. So no one's here anyway, so who cares?
Yeah.
Right.
Hi.
Hey. So
hey Nancy.
Sing it, dude.
We're gonna have Nancy going to Mexico. Not that that's any of your business. But by the time she gets back, I think we're gonna have a theme song
for a new little podcast.
That's right.
That I'm going to be doing, and
it's called Hey Nancy.
It's called Hey Nancy, no comma. And someone I know to my left is writing me a little theme song. Already wrote it.
Yeah,
actually,
it just needs to be executed.
Yeah, we need like a lot of other voices and effects and drums and yeah. So I'll be back from Mexico at the end of the month, and then we'll get some peoples in this little studio that we built. We're coming to you from Paloma Media in Chinatown, our little studio that we built. And we're going to talk a little bit more today about the New York Times, because it's just been covering itself in so much glory. We thought we would, honor that and celebrate it.
I mean, so this is the third or the fourth time that we've turned on mics in this studio to talk about stuff. We did have a lost episode because it's got to have one. Yeah, it's lost because the sound was so terrible. So anyway, this is really the third that will be airing. Okay.
So,
but in each case, we ended up talking about Times things, and then they just as they keep making new things. So previously we talked about the Donald McNeil case, which we won't reiterate too much here. And then what was it? I forget.
Well, no, actually, we started with Donald McNeil, and then we continued, and we were also talking about the Daily and
Andy Mills and stuff.
Yeah.
But since then, there's been a whole bunch of other things, and Nancy's been reporting this out, which you'll be reading hopefully soonish, which means they have to write it, I think.
I know. It's been a busy week, and I'm getting on a plane in the morning, so I'll try to I'm either going to watch a movie on the plane and cry because that's what you do.
Yes.
Or I'll be writing, and I'll probably be writing. So yes, I am reporting this out. I have been talking to some people. Oh, I know what we talked about last time. We talked about the Nicole Hannah-Jones tweet.
Yes, and the Times PR, saying that there was an inadvertent doxing, semi-doxing of the Free Beacon reporter, which is just a bizarre thing. But there's since then there's been 75 different developments. But maybe even before we talk about that, I think we should answer the eternal question of who gives a rip, Nancy? Why should we care about the weird flappings around of the New York Times?
Well, I think we should care because, they do call it the paper of record, and they call it that for a reason, because I think for a long time, I believe, and people will disagree with this, I believe for a long time they really tried to do that and be that. I think that they did care about what was going on with their fellow Americans. It wasn't always about having a political point of view or siphoning the news through a particular lens. They were interested, and not everybody, but they had our trust, right? You kind of trusted. You might not like all of it or like the opinion pieces or give a crap about the movies that they're reviewing, but you had a sense that they were pretty solid. They had the money and they had the bodies on the ground, everywhere. And I feel at this point, they have lost my trust. And, you could say, and we were talking about this at lunch, you could say, okay, look, I'm kind of done with the opinion pieces. And I want to talk a little bit about that later, about why we're reading what we're reading in opinion. But we'll get to that. And you might not care about the culture stuff and say, it's culture war stuff. But listen, if I can't trust you on this, because I know it has to go through this giant gauntlet to get there, how do I trust you on Afghanistan? I don't trust the way that they're choosing to deliver the news. And I think that matters when maybe the most previously well-respected newspaper in the world has lost our trust. I think that's a big deal.
I think there's also an argument that the Times is a bellwether. For a long time, it's been the paper that all smaller daily newspapers in the country aimed to emulate, and their reporters wanted to end up working there. I have long argued that that's a mistake because the Times is a product of a rarely a competitive newspaper market in New York City. It's a bunch of different newspapers that do different things. And so by emulating, the LA Times tries to emulate the New York Times, that means it's not doing the stuff that the New York Post or the Daily News does and should think about doing, like cover local politics and crime. Well, so I think there's always been a problem of that. But Times has been a bellwether for the media industry, the journalism newspaper industry. But you can also say, I think, increasingly a bellwether for, trying to come up with a non-pejorative way of saying this, but sort of managerial liberalism or progressivism, and especially lately the more late variants. Again, what's a non-pejorative way, but more like where identity politics is going in on the left side of the political spectrum, the Times is kind of leading. And so these clashes that are in the paper, which a lot of has been reported out in the wake of the Donald McNeil thing in particular, but also the Andy Mills and some other things. That is the clash, and it's very funny. Our mutual friend Barry Weiss, a year ago or in the summer, was excoriated by a whole bunch of people in the building. This is before she left. By when she pointed out in the wake of the Tom Cotton op-ed thing that there is a fundamental conflict at the paper between the wokes who are younger and the old newspaper farts who are older. And they have a different idea about liberalism, different ideas about newspapers. And everyone's like, that's just not true. How dare you say that untrue thing, you person who always says untrue things. And it's like everything. And it just shows that she's right.
Completely right. I had a piece in Newsweek about a week ago regarding what happened to Donald McNeil Jr. And I got a really, really beautiful email from someone who had been in the barrel himself, including the Times excoriating him, and he sort of got canceled and lost his job. And he wrote me a very, very sweet piece for saying, thank you so much for telling the truth. But here's the deal. He said, you can't fight the New York Times. And I was like, yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Happens if you decide. Well, I mean, that's, I think, a subplot of the fight between the Silicon Valley and New York Times.
Right. Sorry. I'm sorry. When I say fight, I will repeat, I never really want to fight against anybody. I want to just put good work out. And if it happens to be like we're sitting here talking, pushing back against their ethos or what they're doing, okay, well, that's fighting. But you just have to speak the truth as you see it, and also create new mediums, because if people are going to start losing trust, they want to go someplace where they trust what people are saying, where they're getting some enjoyment, where they wake up in the morning not just wanting to chew a bunch of nails, they want to be part of something interesting. We're hoping to do that. You see that they're doing that on Clubhouse. Some people are doing it on Substack, and in a way it's fighting by being positive, by putting positive stuff out in the world and saying, I'm not interested. I'm just not interested in what you're doing anymore. I'm actually becoming disinterested in what the New York Times does.
I think an interesting part of the kind of bellwether question, in which the Times on now kind of a daily basis is demonstrating, is the extent to which it's become mainstream in journalism circles to shrink the public square, not expand it. I mean, the post-war mission of journalism was widely understood to be, we're going to expand the public square, create a big one, people can have it, but hopefully also, get to a certain type of truth or common understanding. There's lots of fictions that were baked into that model, to be sure, but there's always an aspiration of a bigger public square. On a daily basis, we're seeing journalists, being tattletales, trying to appeal to Twitter's terms of service to say, oh, this person should be kicked off, or the Fox News should be kicked off the air, or this sitting,
because it hurts me.
This sitting politician shouldn't have an account, and that's new. And so part of the fight that we've seen since in the last week, there was an article about a guy who's had a blog for years called Slate Star Codex. And if this is all new to you, it's going to be a little bit hard to understand, but I'm not going to get in the weeds of it. Basically, dude, super rationalist, Bay Area kind of nerd, blogger, deep thinker, long writer.
I don't know how he writes 40,000 words a day, but okay.
He's a psychologist or a therapist of some sort.
I think he's a psychiatrist, actually.
And he's overlapped in kind of some circles with everybody probably at some point. But anyways, he's been this writer for a long time. Last year, the Times was going to do a big piece on him, and as part of it, and his name was an anagram of Scott Alexander, which was his first two names, but that wasn't his last name. And the Times, as part of this, said, well, we're going to use your full name. He freaked out because it's bad for patients, bad for business, and just he was worried. He's also worried that they were going to kind of heavy breathe that maybe he was a white supremacist or that he had racist friends or something.
Just ask you a question?
Yeah.
If they had not wanting to do the smear job that they kind of did, do you think they would have honored his request? If they liked him, if they thought he was like a super terrific guy, we want to write a piece about you, and it's like, hey,
sure,
great, but could you not use my last name?
The Standard, as Robbie Swaby wrote at Reason at the time, last summer when this came up, because basically before that article came out, the guy who wrote the blog said, screw it, I'm deleting my blog because I don't want to get revealed. And as Robbie pointed out at the Times has honored other people's requests to be anonymous, even though they were also kind of easy to find if you tried really hard.
So it's always a super great idea as a journalist to piss off the people you're writing about. I mean, sometimes you have to. I hope you take my meaning from that. If people are trusting you, you're talking about them. Don't do that. There was no reason for them to name him.
So when that happened, there's a big kind of Silicon Valley, like enough already feeling or expression of feeling towards the New York Times, and particularly its tech reporters. I think to overgeneralize reporting on technology in Silicon Valley in particular has gone from being pretty G. Willikers, they're inventing the future, they're awesome, they're great, it's Fast Company, all the way down to being more Kara Swisher, like rancid, and like these titans are enabling these terrible things. And part of that is the public square discussion too. Like they're not policing the public square in the way that we like them to, or they're allowing for unauthorized discussion and etc. So this moment last summer became a moment when a lot of people in Silicon Valley was like, screw those people once and for all. Don't ever deal with the New York Times. Clubhouse, I think, sort of, which came out of some of that, which Nancy has been become a den mother since last time.
Holy mackerel. We did Liz Wolfe, staff editor at Reason, and we did a little one on Monday night, like literally just like, okay. And then we jumped in Robbie Swaby because he was there. We have 400 people there, which was nuts. And we're going to be doing it again this coming Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern time over on the Clubhouse. A few invitations, but anyway, whatever. Yeah, join it. It was super fun, but continue.
So I think Clubhouse is part of the idea of other people creating their new squares for themselves. Like, okay, we're just not going to deal with you. And there was this tension, especially with the Times technology, one of their technology reporters, Taylor Lorenz, who kept going in. She has a Medium page in which she sneaks into Clubhouse. Here's someone she thinks say the word retard or something, and says, "Oh my God, I said this shocking and awful thing," and she like collects them all. It's a really
and posts the screenshots of the people that were in the room, and then actually made a mistake about who she was tagging. That she said it was Mark Andreessen, it wasn't, and then, But the funniest thing about that was when, and we were talking about this at lunch, was it her or somebody that said, they're not taping it. Clubhouse, how am I supposed to be a journalist and do my work? I was like, are you kidding me? Do some fucking reporting. That's what you do.
Their tweet so they wrote a feature on Clubhouse today, which is actually, it wasn't the worst feature. But the tweet advertising it was like, this place is allowing for unfettered conversation. And as many people pointed out, like, why you want to fetter?
Yeah.
Well, who's pro-fetter?
Who's pro-fettering?
And that's actually kind of a thing that's happening in journalism. Like, oh my God, Reuters had a piece that podcasts are a free speech loophole. Like, what? And there will be pressure put on. We're doing this through YouTube here. I don't know what things that you've gotten on podcast platforms now, but like whoever does these things will be under pressure at various points for hosting things and a lot of that pressure is being led by journalists, and that is such the bass-ackwards from where it used to be. So the piece finally came out because Scott Alexander, whatever his actual name is, he decided to out himself a couple of weeks
Right.
back, restart his blog and sort of like talk about things. And it's a lovely piece. Go read it. And so finally, in response to that, Times printed its long-awaited piece. And what's I think indicates the power shift of the moment, and I use that word on purpose, is that the piece is not good at all.
No.
There was an actually really good piece about the previous imbroglio with the Times and Slate Star Codex, written in the New Yorker that last fall, I think, and I forget the writer of it, who sort of described the rationalist movement from which he emanates. And I'm sure he got a couple of things wrong, or she got a couple of things wrong, but it largely, it was an attempt to go into a world and try to describe it for outsiders. It was a good faith attempt. The Times had all this time to do this piece, and it was crap.
I also said, and I didn't read the New Yorker piece, I don't think, but there's really something to be said, like to try and go into a world and try to understand it and to speak to the characters and kind of give it some context. The writer of the Times piece, about Slate Star Codex was like, how did he phrase it? He said, he was writing to appeal to the psyche of Silicon Valley. And I was like, I never thought I could be so angry at the word "the." So that shows you the incuriosity of that writer who has decided, oh, there's one Silicon Valley type. They're all exactly the same. It's like cookies. We just stamp them out. What? This is not, why are you so incurious, New York Times? Well, why? Because they've got their enemy, right?
That's the thing. It's the power dynamic of it. This piece can be read, and I think accurately, and this sort of pains me to say, through some ancient memory of a world being different, that it's an act of retribution. Almost, it is an exercise of power. There was actually a piece that I saw someone retweeting out today that was written in the Columbia Journalism Review last October by Hamilton Nolan, of former Gawker alum, like so many of the people who don't do journalism in the way that I appreciate tend to be, and I say that out of reverence and friendship with Nick Denton. But I do. But he wrote a piece saying, media is about using its power to cut down the powerful people. That's our job. And it's like,
wow, that's our job? Really? Nobody told me. I've been doing this 23 years. My
around
job
it.
is wow. Wouldn't that be a delightful beat? Who can I cut down today? How much joy?
Axe body spray. So yeah, it can be read, I think, as that exercise in kind of cutting down, and also to point in areas where there are people having conversations and building worlds that do not depend on and actually have a sense of hostility after a while towards the traditional gatekeepers of journalistic discussion and thought. And that's fascinating to watch because I think that there's a big business question in front of us right now, not just newspapers, certainly in cable news, but elsewhere. This happens every changing of who has the keys to the White House. Sadly, it shows we're too presidentially focused in our lives and stupid. But it's like, what does media do after Trump?
Well,
what does the New York Times do after Trump? It was the resistance paper along with the Washington Post. There ain't no resistance. Yeah,
that's right. So we were talking about this when we were walking to the subway. It's like, okay, so the New York Times, which was having troubles financially, just like most newspapers, they times 7 their business when Trump came in. Like, they went berserk with subscribers because so many people were angry, and the Times was angry, and we're going to get them now. It's going to be Russia. It's going to be Stormy Daniels. It's going to be whatever. So they were doing pretty well, flushing cash, and they hired a lot of people. Well, you know what? They're not angry anymore. So, okay, so you're going to lose some subscribers. That's normal. You're going to shed some. Okay. Now you've got this new sort of angry beat where, everybody is your enemy. Well, I don't know. I'm kind of bored by it, and I don't think it's very interesting, and I don't think there's a giant audience for this. So let's do some numbers. If you've lost all your anger subscribers and you're alienating people that don't want to, just have this identity politics be the scrim through every story as I said, if I can't trust you in the opinion pieces, how do I trust you on Afghanistan? People are just going to stop reading. Okay, so what happens to their business model when they have now lost, I don't know, 50% of their readers?
Well, we don't know that.
But no, I'm not saying what if. I'm posing a possibility. What happens when their readership and their subscriptions start to shrink and they have less money? What happens? Oh, they're going to have to let employees go. We all know. We've all been at publications where there's been downsizing. I mean, this is the story
It's like the natural state of humanity is abject poverty. The natural state of newspapers is layoffs.
Is attrition. It's going to happen. So what happens at the Times when you start laying off people who have decided that they need, whoever it is, more representation, and they found it at the Times, and they found the place where they could, like, be one. What happens when you fire them? Because you have to, because you can't support it anymore because people don't want that particular message. What happens, Matt?
That's going, all the divisions that are happening at the union at the paper, which is fascinating, which came up very much in the Donald McNeil thing. The union fought for Donald McNeil in 2019 when the offense in question happened. The union seemed to be, through outside reporting, a little bit more split in 2021 as Donald McNeil was shown.
It had a new, I believe in 2019, it got a new president. So I think it was I don't know this for sure. I think it may have been the old regime. I think it was a guy named Glickson that may have been there when they were fighting for McNeil.
And as what's his face, Aaron
Sabarium. Yes.
I keep confusing him with the fifth column listener. Different Aaron, but as he pointed out in his reporting on it, I think it was his reporting, that there's a reason why the Times employees, there's a letter of 150 employees that we raised hackles on previously. That's basically like intent doesn't matter in language, but that they use words like harm. We feel harm or we feel threatened. That triggers certain labor protections. So it gets around traditional labor union concerns or protections on the employee in question, which is super fascinating just as a question of labor law, but also as a question of plain language and normal courage, like a word that someone said on a trip caused me harm in this newsroom. And they also, and this relates to a piece by Ben Smith, who's all about
someone hi people, I am reading your questions and your comments. Someone just asked about the Ben Smith article.
It's making me, and thank you, Abraham, about my hair. You're wrong, but thank you.
His hair looks amazing.
The Times letter of 150 journalists who presumably were members of the union as well, as a letter that was like demanding an apology to them by their fellow guild member. Really weird.
For saying something a year and a half ago to a student in Peru. They wanted the apologies. And if they felt harmed by that, how are they going to feel when they get laid off? And how are they going to react? And you got to have an enemy. I'm sorry, it's going to be a mess.
I mean, enemies work in journalism when the readers have a sense of fight or flight response to the person in question. And a lot of people had that response. We were at a dinner last night where people sort of like, why are people so angry under Trump? Well, a lot of people felt like directly threatened or just horrified by him in a way that had them like this for a long time. And maybe I was that person a little bit, or in my own way. Hopefully I don't do this with my hands because it's weird. But like you can understand that if you can locus your sense of fear and loathing on someone who has power, it doesn't match up with like random people, actresses who use different pronouns as a joke on their Twitter account. That's not to say they're not going to hurt you. Those people are not out there going to threaten your livelihood as a reader. So like you don't wake up in the morning saying, "My God, there might be a conservative in Hollywood. We got to do something about it."
But anger is animating, and it gives you an identity, and you now have all these other people that are around you, and it's like a movement, and we're swelling, and we're angry again. It'd be so cool if you took all that energy and did some cool work. Someone actually said to me, and I don't know this, so do not quote me because I don't know if it's true, but someone said, maybe Nicole Hannah-Jones could do some more writing. because he said she'd written 2 pieces this year. You know, like, take all of this energy you have to be angry. And maybe she's out and being in, an emissary for 1619. I don't know what she's doing. But instead of just being angry all the time, like, go out and make something.
She's a talented writer too.
Is she?
She wrote a great piece about
the buses,
about busing,
Yeah.
the history of busing, which I disagreed with the conclusion of it, but it was well reported. It was a good history.
I would personally want to see more writing from her than just, I don't know, trashing.
There was a line in the Ben Smith piece, so he went and re-reported some of the kids who had been on the trip with Donald McNeil and had complained about him, and a quote from one of them was like, it's weird because usually adults in that situation have no problem with giving us an apology.
Yeah. We had a little discussion about this on the Clubhouse the other day. Someone was saying, well, the girl that talked about how she, communicated with Donald McNeil while she was on the trip because she kind of really wanted to. She was 17. He was kind of this curmudgeonly, cranky 65-year-old. I mean, it sounds dreadful for him. But anyway, they were like, well, should she have gone on the record? She might be exposing herself to, blah, blah. I was like, maybe we need more people. Actually, she's young, she's 19, but you know what? She wanted to speak on the record. And I think that was great. And I actually appreciated her giving some roundness to this story, as opposed to just this sort of like anonymous Yelp reviews that they gave to the guy, which is what the Daily Beast had used.
And what I think is interesting about her question, it's not that it reflects poorly on her necessarily. It might not, whatever. She's a kid. But it's that she's actually reflecting a culture where there's an expectation now, at least in some corners of the culture, that it's a normal thing for people of certain age station belief systems to demand, expect, and usually receive apologies from the olds who haven't caught up to the ever-changing mores. That's weird, dude. That is weird. Like,
if we did that to our parents, like, what the fuck? Go get my Newports, kid. Like, what? I mean, you have to face this. I have a young adult child who is very not of that ilk at all. She's like, what's wrong with these people? But you have a little bit at home, and it's like
tweens.
Brooklyn
tweens.
Well, one thing that
Dad, that's homophobic. No, I shouldn't say it to me.
No. What are you going around saying? Faggy fag. Anyway, the Ben Smith piece, you actually texted it to me. I was wherever I was, and like exclamation point, because he really kind of put it on the line. He's like, okay, so New York Times, are you going to continue to try to like really talk to a broad arena, worldwide arena? Or are you going to say, you know what? We're changing lanes now. We're going to have a more narrow cast, and it's going to be, he said, the American version of The Guardian.
Yeah,
I didn't really resonate with me. I don't read The Guardian that much, but I was like, well, sure, they can do that. They can absolutely decide that they want to talk to, instead of talking to 500 million people, that they want to talk to 5 million people. They can totally do that. But what happens to your business model? You just has to change. And maybe it does. Maybe the New York Times is sunsetting in a way, and that's fine. I actually am fine with that, because I'm just kind of bored at this point with what they're doing. I don't find it to be trenchant. And I mean, I'm sure some of it is, but it's just like, yeah.
Let's go to a question from Leah Grant. Will you guys be doing these podcasts on a regular basis or just randomly when there's something you want to talk about? Listen, just the first time that we did this, let's see if the dummies can work the machinery.
Yeah, we are. Boy.
And this time we have a serious upgrade. We did have to call in Michael Moynihan.
We did have to call Michael Moynihan and put him on speakerphone and walk us through how
we plug that machine into that thing on the audio? And also we're just like testing stuff out, let's try to do something live on YouTube, which is something that the Fifth Column has never done. I think Reason Roundtable did one live or
did
one.
Did you do one yesterday? Didn't you?
No, but we don't like
stream it.
We don't stream it live.
Okay.
I think we've done it in the past. Anyways, it's just a chance to experiment. Now that we've kicked the tires a few times, I predict that there will be a proper podcast with a really good theme song. um, called Hey Nancy.
Hey Nancy.
And
Which I like because it just makes me laugh every time I say it. So
That's-
that's good,
that's
right?
a good sign.
You want a laughing podcaster.
But she's going to get people at her table. Don't want to predict too much the future because these things just develop in their own way. But certainly when we were talking about this, one ideal is, Nancy gets two people together and talk about stuff.
Yep. And will Matt and I do this sometimes? Yeah, we'll do this sometimes because it's the conversations we're having anyway, and people seem to dig it. So yeah, we'll be doing it sometimes.
Brian mentioned have you guys already discussed the death of Rush Limbaugh? No, we haven't.
We haven't.
Saw that news on the subway, literally coming over.
Yeah, coming over here.
It was announced 40 minutes ago. Be interested to hear your take on its effect on the media landscape. I will venture a preliminary one, which is that sense of that I mentioned. First of all, that he was an incredible radio innovator. He innovated talk. He created modern political talk radio. And just like the way that Roger Ailes created the modern cable TV show and cable network for good and for ill in both cases, I always appreciate the hustle and the game of an innovator, even if I don't personally like them. And I didn't like Limbaugh. I appreciated and would occasionally listen to the way he kind of created a universe around him, this whole sort of ditto heads thing. A guy who reminds me of that a lot, that people probably wouldn't draw a direct connection to, is Jim Rome, the sports podcaster, not podcaster, sports broadcaster, probably most famous for his fight with Jim Everett, former Rams quarterback. But he's got a great radio show and has for thousands of years. And he creates this whole UC Santa Barbara. He and I were both at the KCSB back in the day.
KCSB.
He creates this and encourages an entire subculture around it in the same way that Limbaugh did. And so respect in that sense. And at the same time, I think Limbaugh was the embodiment and created the template in which the talk radio, in addition to being a haven for people who felt left out by mainstream media for a long time, artificially, whatever. They just, the public square that had been constructed by the LA Timeses of the world were not satisfying the type of people who flocked first to AM talk radio and then to cable news, both left and right, but mostly on the right. And so he catered to that, and he did so by organizing hatreds. I used to, when I first, I'm late to a lot of things. I first listened to Limbaugh and also conservative talk radio during a brief respite. I spent the first 8 years, the 90s, living abroad, far away. And I would come back, and I was in Oregon once at my mom's place, chopping wood for basically 3 weeks to make a little money in 94 out by Beaverton.
Sounds great.
Super awesome. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Mike. No, I needed the money. And so anyways, I was bored and I was chopping wood all day. So I was listening to this and I was fascinated by, and this is like 94 after the midterms, and talk radio is living high. And it was amazing how fast any given segment would take to get to the name Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton. And when I moved back to the country in the late 90s, when I would drive in my car, you hit the little, the thing, the radio,
thing it's
scan,
called
speed.
a radio. It's this old thing.
But the button that does the deal. And
next to the cigarette lighter.
And I would just keep my finger there and see how long it would take them to talk about either Teddy Kennedy or Hillary Clinton, or like there was a third maybe, just for a rule of three reasons. And it was always within 10 seconds. Like they didn't waste any time. And so they kind of cultivated this audience. And that audience was organized around a sort of common loathing. And I always found that, and continued to find it, just as a human, super off-putting. I remember the first Republican that I went to, I think, was in 2004 in New York. It was the post 9/11 convention. And seeing the way that Teddy Kennedy was used as a line, Teddy Kennedy can go eat a bag wherever he might be now. Yeah. No love for a guy who, killed someone and covered up the crime. It's kind of a bad thing to do. But all you had to say was either like, and Teddy Kennedy, and then you'd hear this war whoop by all the people wearing their patriotic pajamas on the floor. Back then it was Teddy Kennedy, and it was San Francisco. And granted, you get a war whoop out of me about San Francisco these days, but like you could see there was like it was flicking that button now in Republican like grassroots things is just the media, right?
Mhm.
That is the one. There isn't a politician that everyone is terrified. It's not like Joe Biden gets the heart pumping fast, but the media does.
So here's a question. So people do that. They hate listen, but it satisfied something. Do you think people start hate reading the New York Times?
Well,
or is it too narrow? It's just
no.
it's
I
just-
mean, that you can't sustain it. I mean, I would listen sometimes, but I would get bored after hearing Hillary Clinton again for the next time. So like, yeah, people do, and this is true in the rise in the advent of the internet, and it's an underappreciated thing. People listen to the opposition, or they watch the opposition or the perceived opposition from their own beliefs because they want to see how the other half lives. Conservatives listen to NPR. A certain amount of liberals or progressives who will watch Fox News because they sort of want to see what's going on.
I used to listen to when I lived in LA. I lived in Los Feliz, and my daughter's best friend lived in Venice. And I would drive back and forth every weekend to take her to her house. And I used to listen to Dr. Laura.
Oh yeah,
and that was actually a super pleasure. Of course, I disagreed with almost everything, kind of like I guess politically or morally.
Was she
but
still self-helping a little bit, or was it all politics?
No, she was taking calls.
Yeah.
Like, hi, like I'm the adoptive mother, or like my husband did this. I have to say, even though we came from extremely different spectrums, she gave some damn good advice. She was all tough love. And I thought it was pretty interesting. And
Yeah.
she was fun.
It was
to
Dr.
listen
Laura
to.
Schlesinger, and the same it was on KABC, if I'm not mistaken, and they had another one who was even bigger at the time, but didn't take off nationally. It was also a woman doing kind of therapy-esque stuff. LA is so good for radio.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, you're in your car all the time.
Yeah.
So, okay. The one thing I guess I talked about the Ben Smith thing. Yeah. So I'm going to give myself a plug.
Too.
Besides, yeah, I'm going to be doing a clubhouse tonight around 9:30 with some interesting people, Carol Markowitz and Mary Catherine Ham. That'll be fun.
What's the
I don't
organizing
know.
topic?
I don't know. Carol's just like, Nancy, come do this with us.
Cool
I'm like,
ladies
okay.
on Clubhouse.
Yeah. And Robbie. He can be an honorary lady. Robbie
He
Swap.
cares more about his hair than you guys do about yours.
Definitely. But in the spirit of just creating new media, some of you might know I have Substack, and it's called Make More Pie.
Make more pie.
We're
Definitely
making more pie. This is a piece of pie right now that you guys have. So go over and subscribe to my Substack. And if you want to pay for the subscription, that'd be great, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
So, well, this is going to be our last one for about 10 days because I'm jetting out of town tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us, and subscribe to the Paloma Media channel, and we'll see you here in about 11 days.
And for the Fifth Column fans who've been like giving us a hard time
Yeah.
for the last few days, we're recording here tonight. So stuff will be coming to you. It's not going to be live YouTube of Moynihan doing the can dance.
But it could be.
But it could be. That's the thing. It just
You
really
could just throw it on this channel.
the secret Paloma stripper
Yeah.
OnlyFans for Moynihan.
If he does the voice. Okay, guys. See you soon.
Bye. Perfect. That's the ideal.